The war in Ukraine is still not over. Tensions involving Iran have made global relations even more unstable. The United States and Russia continue to distrust each other, watching every move from a distance. Yet, in the far north of the world, Russia has revived an idea that sounds almost unbelievable. A tunnel beneath the sea connecting Russia to Alaska. The distance is surprisingly short. Mainland Russia and Alaska are separated by only about 88 kilometers, 55 miles. In the middle of the Bering Strait, two small islands, one Russian and one American, stand just a few kilometers apart. Politically, the two countries remain divided. Geographically, they are almost touching. So why is Russia talking about a tunnel to America while relations between the two countries remain so tense? What is Russia really trying to achieve beneath the sea? The project is known as the Bering Strait Tunnel. It has not reached the construction stage yet. According to the latest reports, it is still in the engineering design phase, which Russian officials say is continuing. This is why the project deserves a closer look. Before becoming a real structure, it has already become a political signal from Russia. The latest discussion about what some media call the Putin-Trump tunnel came from Kirill Dmitriev, CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, RDIF, and President Vladimir Putin's special envoy for international investment and economic cooperation. Speaking at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Dmitriev said that Russia and the United States were still discussing the Bering Strait Tunnel project and that an agreement to continue the engineering design would soon be signed. However, Russian state news agency TASS later clarified that the agreement would not be signed with the US government. Instead, it would be signed with an engineering company responsible for preparing the technical design. So the situation is clear. The engineering work is moving forward, but there is still no political agreement between Russia and the United States. Dmitriev's background makes the story even more interesting. The Russian Direct Investment Fund has been under US sanctions since February 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The US Treasury Department also sanctioned Dmitriev personally. In other words, the person promoting a major Russia-America infrastructure project represents an organization that is still blocked from much of the American financial system. The location itself also adds another layer of complexity. In its 2024 Arctic strategy, the U.S. Department of Defense describes the Arctic as a region of growing strategic importance. Alaska is considered a key part of America's national defense, hosting major military infrastructure, including air defense systems, early warning networks, and maritime surveillance connected to NORAD. That means any proposal for a tunnel leading directly to Alaska is not simply about transportation. It also touches one of America's most sensitive security regions. Geographically, it is easy to understand why the Bering Strait has always attracted attention. The two continents are separated by only about 88 kilometers. In the middle of the strait, Russia's Big Diomede Island and America's Little Diomede Island are only about 4 kilometers apart. On paper, the tunnel seems possible. In reality, the challenges are enormous. One unusual aspect is that almost all recent updates have come from Moscow. American officials reportedly involved in economic discussions have not publicly confirmed these talks. The Kremlin says communication with Washington continues, even as negotiations over the war in Ukraine remain difficult. So before becoming a joint construction project, the tunnel has already become a political message. Russia appears to be signaling that cooperation with the United States is still possible, even while relations remain strained. If such a connection were ever built, a tunnel would make far more sense than a giant bridge. The Bering Strait is relatively shallow. Some geographic surveys place its deepest point at around 90 meters, much shallower than many other seas. But the region lies near the Arctic Circle, where extreme weather, sea ice, and very short construction seasons create major engineering challenges. Most proposals imagine the tunnel beginning in Chukotka in eastern Russia, passing beneath the Bering Strait, and emerging in Alaska. The Diomede Islands are often included in these plans because they sit almost exactly in the middle of the crossing. Interbering, one of the longtime supporters of the project, has proposed a tunnel stretching roughly 119 kilometers or more, including sections extending inland on both sides. The design would likely include several parallel tunnels rather than a single passage. One tunnel would carry transportation, while others would be used for maintenance, emergency access, and technical operations. A tunnel more than 100 kilometers long would require advanced ventilation systems, electrical networks, communication equipment, emergency exits, and evacuation routes capable of operating in harsh Arctic conditions. Then comes one of the project's most eye-catching claims. Dmitriev argued that tunneling technology developed by Elon Musk's The Boring Company could reduce construction costs from an estimated $65 billion to less than $8 billion. He also suggested that modern tunneling technology could complete the project in under 8 years. However, many experts believe the biggest challenges are not actually beneath the sea. Construction equipment, workers, fuel, electricity, ports, and supply routes would all have to be developed in one of the world's most remote regions. On the Russian side, Chukotka is far from the country's major industrial centers. On the American side, Alaska would also require major transportation upgrades, so the tunnel would connect to existing infrastructure instead of ending in isolation. For that reason, the total cost depends not only on the tunnel itself but also on thousands of kilometers of supporting infrastructure. If the Putin-Trump tunnel were ever completed, its impact would be both symbolic and practical. For the first time, Asia and North America would have a direct land connection. Today, travel and trade between the two continents depend almost entirely on ships and airplanes. A tunnel beneath the Bering Strait would transform a natural boundary into a physical corridor connecting eastern Russia with Alaska. For Russia, the project is closely connected to its Arctic strategy. The Northern Sea Route stretches approximately 5,600 kilometers along Russia's Arctic coastline, linking the Kara Strait to Cape Dezhnev near the Bering Strait. Russia sees this as the shortest maritime route between Western Eurasia and the Asia-Pacific region. If a tunnel to Alaska became part of this larger network, Russia could present a new vision where goods, energy, and infrastructure move not only across Arctic shipping lanes, but also directly into North America. Economically, supporters claim the benefits could be enormous, although these estimates remain theoretical. Railway Gazette has reported that a future transportation corridor linking China, Russia, Canada, and the United States through the Bering Strait could potentially handle up to 100 million tons of cargo every year. This does not guarantee success, but it explains why the project continues to attract attention. For the United States, however, the calculation is more complicated. Even if presented as an economic partnership, a direct physical connection from Russia to Alaska would inevitably become part of America's national security planning. Natural resources also play an important role. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the Arctic may contain around 90 billion barrels of undiscovered oil, 1,669 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and 44 billion barrels of natural gas liquids that could potentially be recovered. These enormous energy reserves help explain why major powers continue to compete for influence in the Arctic. The tunnel would not automatically unlock these resources, but it could improve access, logistics, and strategic influence across the region. If the project ever succeeds, the biggest change may not simply be faster travel between Russia and Alaska. It would symbolize the beginning of a new era in the Arctic, one where the region becomes a center of global logistics, energy, defense, and international diplomacy. Interestingly, the idea itself is not new. Plans to connect Russia and Alaska date back to the late 19th century, long before the war in Ukraine, long before Donald Trump, and even before the United States and Russia became today's global superpowers. In the 1890s, former Colorado Governor William Gilpin imagined a worldwide railway connecting multiple continents. A few years later, engineer Joseph Strauss, who would later become famous for the Golden Gate Bridge, proposed a bridge across the Bering Strait. By the early 1900s, the concept became more serious. In 1904, American railway advocates proposed a Siberia-Alaska railway connected through an underwater tunnel beneath the Bering Strait. The following year, Tsar Nicholas II reportedly gave preliminary approval to a French-American syndicate interested in developing the project. But political instability, wars, enormous costs, and extreme geography prevented it from moving beyond the planning stage. Over the decades, the idea returned under different names. Some called it the Intercontinental Peace Bridge. Others referred to it as the Eurasia-America Peace Tunnel. Many versions included railways, energy pipelines, and fiber optic communication cables. The pattern has always been the same. Whenever relations between Russia and the United States appeared to improve, the project resurfaced as a symbol of cooperation. Whenever tensions increased, it disappeared once again. In 2007, Russia revived the proposal with an estimated cost of around $65 billion. The plan envisioned a transportation corridor connecting eastern Russia and Alaska through railways, energy infrastructure, and fiber optic cables. At the time, it sounded like a dream of globalization, a future where someone could theoretically travel by rail from London to New York through Siberia and Alaska. But once again, financial, political, and logistical obstacles stopped the project. Today, when people speak about the so-called Putin-Trump tunnel, those same challenges remain. In fact, they may be even greater. Russia is still under heavy sanctions. The war in Ukraine continues. Competition in the Arctic is becoming more intense. Relations between Washington and Moscow have not fully recovered. In many ways, this is an old dream being revived during one of the most suspicious periods in modern international politics. That is why the Bering Strait continues to capture people's imagination. The distance is short, the symbolism is enormous, and the consequences could reshape global geopolitics. Some see the tunnel as a future bridge for cooperation. Others see it as a new front in the competition for influence in the Arctic. As long as Russia and the United States continue to distrust each other, the Bering Strait tunnel will likely remain exactly where it is today, close enough to imagine, but still too difficult to build. Because this is one of the few places on Earth where two nuclear superpowers almost touch. And if the tunnel is ever completed, the world will not simply witness the opening of an underwater passage. It may witness the beginning of a new era of strategic competition in the Arctic.